South Korean boy band BTS has been topping music charts all over the world this summer. Their first release this year, Butter, spent a record 9 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, outlasting any other single this year. And the most recent single, Permission to Dance, has also topped the chart for a week, giving the band 10 straight weeks at the top of the Hot 100. The two songs are also enjoying widespread popularity across Asia, mostly ranking within the top 5 singles on major streaming platforms such as iTunes and Spotify. We discussed today what makes these tracks the songs of the summer, and for this we connect with Chris MOLANPHY, US pop chart analyst and host of the Hit Parade podcast, and Rob Graham, CEO and executive producer at Eon Media Group. Thank you both so much for joining us this morning, and well, let's go straight into the questions, starting with you, Chris. Now,
sure thing.
BTS has constantly outdone itself this year. Until this week, the boy band was pretty much ruling the Billboard Hot 100 for 10 weeks, and Butter still remains #1 on the Songs of the Summer chart. So what do you make of this #1 streak, and what do you think makes BTS's Butter more appealing to Americans than their newest tune, Permission to Dance?
Well, what's powering Butter at the top of the charts is the depth of dedication of their fandom here in America. So there are BTS fans, you might call them members of the army, who have been buying and streaming not only the original version of Butter, but all of the various remixes. They have been buying physical copies, vinyl, cassette. These count for the charts. And it must be said that, first of all, Butter is a very catchy song. And it sounds friendly to the American airwaves. And it's also in English. Of course, this was a big deal last year when BTS first recorded in English with their single Dynamite. That was their first #1 song in America, and English had a great deal to do with that. However, since then, BTS have scored several #1 hits in America, including the mostly Korean Life Goes On, which only spent a week at #1 last fall, but was still rather significant because it was the first mostly Korean song to top the American Hot 100 in its history. That is very significant.
Right, they've been making, well, basically they've been breaking record after record, and it's all very exciting to see here from South Korea. And, well, Rob,
Certainly.
now your Asia Pop 40 chart is a pan-regional ranking of popular songs across Asia. So what has been the reaction to BTS's Butter and Permission to Dance across the countries that you're tracking? And, well, in which countries has the boy band done particularly well in?
Yeah, well, it's BTS have just, I mean, they've gone nuts everywhere, basically. To echo what Chris was saying, you know, the songs are very accessible on radio. They're very, you know, they're great radio pop songs. And it doesn't really matter that there's a smattering of Korean in the song or if it's all in Korean. The melodies seem to work everywhere, and that's what strikes a chord with their fan base around Asia. It's difficult to actually pinpoint which markets are more popular for BTS than others. They are just a supersonic phenomenon everywhere, and we've seen quite a bit of movement on the chart, but whenever they do anything, it just goes nuts. And you know, Dynamite was by far, I think it was on our #1. It was on #1 for 10 or 12 weeks or so, but it was in the chart for about 44 weeks, and still in the chart. So you know, it's a massive song. And Permission to Dance, you know, hasn't been as popular yet as Butter. Butter has been, you know, huge, but I think in Asia, Dynamite was really the massive song more in the times.
And, well, Chris, now the band's hit single, Dynamite, that was met with roaring success. That was quite unprecedented for a K-pop artist in the United States. And now they've been leading the charts for, they were leading the charts for 10 consecutive weeks as of last week with Butter and Permission to Dance. What do you think what do you think it is about these tunes that make them such popular summer tracks?
I mean, BTS really planned things carefully, especially with Butter. Butter is a hot weather kind of hit. It sounds like a summer song. Many people pointed out that its bass line, it kind of has this thump, thump, thump sound, that it resembles an old hit by Queen called Another One Bites the Dust. And that's a familiar sound to American ears. And so that didn't hurt. But that's just only the bass line. The rest of the song is quite original. And as with Dynamite, it really shows off the personality of the 7 members of BTS, which is important, I think, because their fandom in America is very fervent. I wouldn't say that, everybody in America is a BTS fan, but those who are fans are very, very devoted. And that accounts for the success.
And Rob, now BTS's Korean songs such as DNA, Fake Love and Love Yourself, they've been in the Asian charts as well. Do you think that the listeners across the Asia Pacific favour the Korean songs more, or are they more inclined, as the North American fans are, towards the English songs?
I don't think the language makes a huge issue in Asia. They find it just as accessible. We've seen that with Japanese artists. We see it with Filipino and Indonesian artists in their market. So I think, obviously the common denominator is English in many Asian and Southeast Asian markets. And that provides a level of accessibility, and particularly for radio. There are some jurisdictions, some markets where English language radio only are allowed to play by English language songs as a term of their license. So there are some hurdles there, but I mean, by and large, with streaming and other platforms, they don't really become an issue. So it's in most cases that I don't think the language is an issue. For example, in Thailand, where K-pop is absolutely huge, we've seen instances where people have been taking up learning Korean as a language because of K-pop, because of Korean soap operas, and because of culture generally. And I think K-pop can be credited for really bringing an interest to Korean culture beyond just the music, including language.
Well, since their #1 Billboard streak last year with Dynamite, we've been seeing them break record after record. And Chris, well, some critics say that BTS's chart success is largely due to its download sales, and some say that their ARMY fans have been really ramping those numbers up. But would you say that a lot of that is true? I mean, how does this work? Does the Billboard chart count the sales and downloads and factor them into the chart results?
Yes, absolutely. What's unique about the American Hot 100 is it's a hybrid chart. It combines 3 pools of data. So sales, download sales, streams on streaming services like Spotify, and radio airplay. And this last factor is a little controversial with the BTS fan base, because radio has been the slowest to adopt BTS. So for example, Dynamite, it debuted at #1 Hot 100 last August, September. It did that largely because of sales. Its radio airplay in its first couple of weeks was rather light. However, about 3 months later, it was a top 10 radio record. So radio is just a little slow to catch on to a record. And the same is holding true for Butter this summer. In fact, Butter has yet to go much past the bottom of the top 20 in radio play. What has overwhelmingly fueled its long run at number one are BTS fans buying various versions of the single. And to a lesser extent, streaming. Although streams for other artists, such as Olivia Rodrigo, have been stronger. But the sales for BTS have just been so strong that it overwhelms the somewhat lighter streaming and airplay numbers. And that's how our charts work. It's an average of 3 different kinds of fandom. And if the sales are strong enough, that song can be number one for weeks. And as it turns out, in the case of BTS, nearly 3 months.
Well, Chris, would you say that Butter is, or BTS is making its way up the radio chart, though, in America?
It's kind of holding right now. It's gotten as high as number 20 on the radio chart. I don't think it's gone much higher yet, but that doesn't mean it couldn't continue to go higher. Because when you consider that Dynamite eventually made the top 10 in radio airplay, and it took 3 months. And by the way, that's across all radio genres. So on pure pop stations, Butter is doing better. It's already a top 10 radio.
Right, and we all know how hard it is just to make it into US radio as well. Rob, of course, we can't compare the two bands, but it seems that Blackpink is also doing really well in the Southeast Asian charts in particular, and that's normally dominated by Western pop songs. Would you now say that their South Korean bands are now established as some of the region's most popular artists?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it really, you can trace it back to the early 2000s or late 1990s with Korean artists like Rain that came along, and it just built from there, basically. And it's fair to say that, you know, a lot of these bands started doing, you know, the Wonder Girls were, you know, another group that got some success in the US. I think the strategy of getting them to do some collaborations with Western artists at the beginning of their career was very, very smart. It certainly broke them into the big markets in the West. And, you know, but with respect to Blackpink, they really, you know, their year was 2019. They had a massive year, 2019 and 2020. They were dominating our charts, you know, in every market in Asia. They were all over airplay in the UK, the US, Australia. Their song "Doo Doo Doo Doo" has been the most successful K-pop song on our chart so far, but I think that'll be eclipsed by BTS with Dynamite, which is still in our top 20.
We might anger some Blackpink fans there, but yeah.
Well, I mean, terrific, you know, and they, you know, they sold out some fantastic online concerts during the pandemic. You know, they've been very, very popular, and it's interesting that, you know, BTS have really now, you know, this has been their year, and well, you know, we're all looking to see what happens next with these guys, and I'm sure there's so many Korean artists on the way, but. You know, to answer your question, it's fair to say that you know, K-pop and these artists are absolutely well entrenched in you know, throughout Asia and Southeast Asian markets for sure.
And Rob, would you say that then there's a growing presence of Korean artists in the region's charts, and do you see their popularity further growing?
Yes, absolutely, definitely. You know, since we started our chart, our radio show has been on air for 8-9 years now. When we started, we maybe had, you know, 2 or 3 songs a year, and now I don't think a week goes past where we don't have, you know, 3, 4, 5 songs in the chart at any one time of the entire year. So the popularity is, you know, and this is primarily amongst our English language radio clients who carry our show, is quite staggering, you know, but, you know, not that surprising, to be honest.
Well, this is where we have to end the interview today. I'm afraid we're out of time, but that was Chris MOLANPHY, US pop chart analyst and host of the Hit Parade podcast, and Rob Graham, CEO and executive producer at Eon Media Group, based in Melbourne. Thank you both so much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And to our viewers, as always, thank you very much for watching.